It was a quiet afternoon in the small Vermont cottage where I had lived for nearly 4 decades. The house carried the scent of aged wood, faintly sweet, mixed with memories layered so thick that even silence seemed to echo with them. My name is Margaret, and I am 70 years old. Life has been a long path of joy, grief, and endless change. And though I once thought I was finished growing, I learned that even in these later years, life has ways of surprising us. For most of my adult life, I was a wife. My husband, Thomas, had been my anchor and my mirror. Together we built a world that revolved around family dinners, holidays by the fire, and evenings filled with his gentle laughter. When he passed away 11 years ago, the silence that followed was unbearable. The house that once seemed to overflow with warmth became too large, too empty. I tried to fill it with chores, gardening, and long walks, but no task could mask the emptiness of a bed too wide or a kitchen too quiet. I withdrew from many things I once loved. Friends called, but I found excuses. My daughter invited me to gatherings, but I often declined. I told myself it was easier this way, that solitude meant safety. But truthfully, solitude became a cage, and I convinced myself that it was locked. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, I stumbled across a painting I had started decades earlier. The canvas was unfinished, just soft strokes of blue and faint sketches of a woman by a window. I remembered the evening I had started it, how full of life I had felt then. The memory was so vivid that I could almost smell the turpentine, hear the brush scratching the surface. I sat there, clutching the canvas, feeling as though a part of me had been waiting all these years to be rediscovered. The next morning, without much thought, I set up an old easel by the window. The light spilled across the floor, just as it had when I was younger, and I dipped a brush into paint that felt foreign and familiar at the same time. At first, my hand trembled. My strokes were uncertain, but something stirred inside me. With every color that spread across the canvas, I felt a part of myself returning, a part one had thought was lost with Thomas. Days turned into weeks, and painting became a ritual. Some evenings I would sit back, exhausted but fulfilled, and realize hours had passed without me noticing. The silence of the house began to shift. It no longer pressed against me. Instead, it allowed space for reflection, for imagination, for healing. Through painting, I began to remember the woman I was before marriage, before motherhood, before loss consumed me. I was not just a widow. I was not just a caretaker. I was still Margaret, the girl who once dreamt of traveling to Florence to see the Renaissance masters, the woman who loved colors too bright to be contained. One afternoon, while painting by the window, my daughter Sarah visited unexpectedly. She stood behind me quietly, watching the brush in my hand, the half-finished portrait of a sunrise on the easel. "Mom," she whispered, her voice soft with surprise, "I didn't know you still painted." I looked at her, almost embarrassed, as though she had caught me revealing a secret. "I had forgotten too," I admitted. "Until recently." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "You look different. Lighter somehow." It was then I realized how much I had changed. The heaviness that once chained me to grief had started to lift. I still missed Thomas every day, but my love for him no longer bound me to sorrow. Instead, it fueled me to live the life he would have wanted me to, full, rich, and unapologetically mine. Over time, I joined a local art group. It terrified me at first, walking into a room full of strangers with my canvas clutched tightly in nervous hands. But as I listened to others share their stories, of divorce, of illness, of loneliness, I saw myself in each of them. We were all seeking connection, healing, and a way to remind ourselves that we still mattered. I grew close to one woman in particular, Evelyn, who was 68 and had recently lost her partner. We would often sit together after class, drinking tea, talking about the strange ways grief reshapes a person. She once told me, "Grief carves out space inside you, and eventually, you choose what fills it." Her words lingered with me, reminding me that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about creating anew. Through these connections, I began to step out more. I traveled to nearby towns, visited art exhibits, and even gave a small talk at the community center about rediscovering passions later in life. Standing before that small audience, I felt nervous at first, but as I spoke, my voice grew stronger. I realized that my story mattered. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was human. One evening, while sitting by the window as the sun dipped low, I felt something shift within me. The loneliness I once feared no longer defined me. Instead, I felt a quiet strength, a recognition that life after loss is not a half-life but a continuation, one still capable of beauty, discovery, and joy. I often think about that unfinished painting in the attic, waiting silently all those years. It was more than a canvas. It was a reminder that we are never truly finished, that even at 70, even after loss, there are still colors left to paint, chapters left to write, and moments waiting to surprise us. If you find yourself believing it's too late to begin again, I hope my story reminds you, it never is.